Australians gamble a lot. So yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry in Australia.
I lost over $500,000 over a 12-year period.
You basically put in your money, you press the button, and you wait to see if you've won. Almost 40% of Australians play the pokies. It's something of a national pastime.
Everyone who has grown up in Australia knows that gambling is a part of life.
It's been so heavily marketed and normalised and available in all different shapes and forms. You know, it's everywhere.
Online and mobile betting is becoming more popular, but even amongst young people, poker machines are still the most popular form of gambling. In fact, compared to the rest of the world, we lose significantly more per person gambling than any other nation in the world. This works out to over $24 billion in losses, over half of which is from poker machines. The
amount of money that is extracted out of communities is so enormous compared to the minuscule amount that is returned. Here in the ACT, $167 million is taken out of our community and 11 of it is returned annually. How is that sustainable? The vast majority of people don't recognise correctly as a problem, but you don't have to look very far to see how it impacts all of us.
85% of community-wide harm is associated with low to moderate risk gambling. Also, gambling harm isn't just financial.
From domestic violence to crime to addictions, family breakdowns, suicides.
In critiquing the Reno model, it says the total burden of harm for gambling has similar magnitude of impact as depression and harmful use of alcohol, and exceeds that of cannabis dependence, schizophrenia, epilepsy, and eating disorders combined. So why don't people just stop?
I mean, our job is to provide entertainment, or as the English would say, amusement with prizes, and we do that very successfully.
This is Len Ainsworth. His company introduced poker machines to Australian venues in 1953.
I'll feel responsible for what individuals do when General Motors feel responsible for the accidents that some nut at the wheel might have.
This idea of individual responsibility is what has influenced regulation, policy, and attitudes towards gambling in Australia for the last 15 years. It was conceptualised in a framework known as the Reno model, the idea of focusing on problem gamblers who have impaired control.
It's basically a framework that governments and industry use to encourage or promote and minimise harm from gambling. It's a very contested model in the gambling field, and I would say there's limited evidence that it's an effective model.
Critiquing the Reno model also says responsible gambling initiatives were characterised by retrofit measures that bore little relation to the broader evolving research evidence on best practices to prevent harms.
There's always that level of personal responsibility and personal accountability, not coupled with the correct product information and social environment. It's setting people up for failure and then dumping shame on top of them when they do something that the machine is actually intentionally designed to do. I had no idea about all of the neuroscience that has been packed into a machine. Everybody consented to play, but they didn't consent to the mental manipulation that they had no awareness of.
Poker machines use two types of reinforcement, classical and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning was discovered by Ivan Pavlov when he started looking at what made dogs salivate.
Metronomes, lights, and bells were all used as stimuli, and they all worked as stand-ins for the food. What mattered was not the kind of stimulus that was used, but the fact that it reliably signaled that food was on the way.
The same behavior is reinforced in poker machines with lights and sounds.
Main thing is what we call schedules of reinforcement. Reinforcement is what the layman calls reward, and you can schedule it so that A reward occurs every now and then when a pigeon does something.
This is B.F. Skinner, who discovered operant conditioning.
You don't reinforce every time, perhaps every 10th time, or perhaps only once every minute or something like that. There are a very large number of schedules. One of the schedules which is very effective with rats or pigeons is what we call the variable ratio schedule, and that is at the heart of all gambling devices and has the same effect.
Poker machines were also originally a lot simpler. Now they are highly sophisticated machines with a lot of additional features. Frequently, machines have now more than 50 million possible outcomes, making them impossible to predict. Take dolphin treasure as an example. To go through each possible outcome, it would require a minimum of 5.6 years of continuous use for 24 hours per day. Here in the ACT, the return rate of poker machines is 87%. This rate is for each spin, not each session, meaning you will lose an average of 13% each spin. Averaged out, if you started with $10 and wagered $1 each spin, you would lose everything in about 6 minutes.
When you can load $10,000 into it at a time, that's hardly entertainment. When it's designed to take $1,200 an hour off you, it's not entertainment.
Features on modern machines also work to encourage time and further expenditure on the machine. Take near misses as an example. It conditions people to believe that they almost won, encouraging them to make further bets as they were close to the win. We can also look at losses disguised as wins. Modern machines allow people to place bets on up to 50 lines, encouraging higher bets, but also making wins harder to track. If you win on some lines but not others, the machines still light up as if you have won, even though overall, you've made a loss.
You know, as a teenager, you go to venues to socialise with your friends. I would hear the machines. They were exciting. I thought they would be fun. And I won, and that just set up this pathway in my brain that quickly took hold.
Unfortunately, Kate's story is not uncommon.
I started playing more and more, and the feelings of overwhelm that come with losing money so quickly left me feeling very, very devastated, feeling ashamed, feeling in despair. And that cycle continued throughout most of my adulthood until 32, when I almost took my life. I lost over $500,000 over a 12-year period and thought that there was no hope. It took me about 2 years to reconnect fully with myself after that devastation, to properly, rebuild the parts of me that had been really damaged. My self-esteem was destroyed.
Now Kate's life is completely different. She openly shares her story, offering hope to others who have been through it.
So what we found through the most recent research that we've conducted in the ACT was that family and friends were, particularly a partner, was the most appropriate person to address a gambling problem or gambling harm with someone.
It's always going to be tricky to have a conversation with somebody that you might suspect is struggling with gambling. I've often said to people, try and frame it like you're concerned about their well-being. How are you going at the moment? How can I support you? Lead in the compassion space, not the judgment space.
Obviously it's a very difficult situation and there's a lot of stigma attached to gambling problems. Being very sensitive and non-judgmental, how do they feel that the gambling is impacting on their life? Also, the support services in the ACT that can help people. If you're a family member or a friend, calling those support services as well for assistance is perfectly okay and encouraged, and they will give you really good tips on how to address these types of issues with a family member. But the more we have this discussion in our community, the better, about what we want, what we see as social, and what we see as harmful to our community.
I think the more we can talk about addiction in a constructive way, I think the less space there is for stigma and shame to thrive. Fundamentally, we all want to be understood. And if you're in a space where you're struggling with something and you don't understand what is happening to you, find the missing information to restore your well-being personally, and understand how your external environment is impacting you in a negative way.
If you or someone close to you is being harmed by gambling, support, information and counselling services are available by calling 1-800-858-858 or talking online at gamblinghelponline.org.au.